There, RoboCon. Greetings from Germany. My name is Marduk. I am a software quality engineer at Imbus and the author of Robosapiens, a human-computer interface for automating the SAP GUI that I've been developing over the last 2.5 years. Now, for those of you with experience with SAP automation, you might be asking yourselves, but we already have a robot framework library for automating the SAP GUI. Why do we need another one? Well, by the end of this talk, you will be asking yourselves, why am I not using Robosapiens? It's so cool. And those of you who already use it, you are cool. So why Robosapiens? In the summer of 2021, I started working as a test automation engineer at NRW Bank, a state development bank in Germany. They came to Imbus asking for help with automating a Windows GUI that looks like this. This is the SAP client, in all its vintage glory. There's a modern monochrome theme, but I like colors. For those not familiar with it, SAP is a software suite that is used everywhere. Banks, insurance companies, retail stores, you name it. For automation purposes, it offers an scripting API. And as usual for GUI automation, one also needs an inspector that shows a GUI as a tree of components, each one having a unique selector. For SAP, that tool is a scripting tracker, written by Stefan Schnell. As you can see, the ID is a unique selector for a GUI component, and it resembles the XPath of an element in an HTML document. That means that to automate the SAP GUI, you need to find out the IDs of the components you see on the screen. This is how SAP GUI library works, and it is the main reason why I decided not to use it. Why? Because this is a time-consuming process and in my view is completely unnecessary. The scripting API provides all the information needed to build an in-memory database that can be queried using text selectors. And this is a key idea behind Robosapiens. Now, from a user perspective, domain experts want to tell the computer what to do using everyday language, just like a Scotty in Star Trek 4. So what they need is a robot that understands humans. And thus, Robosapiens was born. Its purpose is to allow humans to talk to SAP. As shown here, all that is needed to fill a form are the field labels and the values. Simple and easy. This is the beauty of Robot Framework. Now let me tell you about the features of Robosapiens. So what is Robosapiens? Well, first of all, everybody says it's a cool name. No wonder we already have 9,000 downloads. Now, like I mentioned before, it has two parts. One designed to be used by humans, which allows domain experts to automate the SAP GUI using familiar language. And one that interacts with SAP under the hood, which maps the keywords to the corresponding API functions and the text selectors to component IDs. This is where the magic happens. Now, humans speak several different languages, and so do the SAP GUI and Robot Framework. Well, Robosapiens too. It actually consists of two localized keyword libraries that are generated automatically from a specification, Robosapiens in English and robosapiens.de in German. I would like to point out that generating Robot Framework libraries from API specifications is a great time saver. Take note. And I hope Robosapiens will inspire more localized Robot Framework libraries. Robosapiens provides nearly 40 keywords that allow interacting with form elements such as text fields, checkboxes, combo boxes, and all that, interacting with tables, which is not trivial because there are several kinds of tables in SAP, and they can contain text fields, checkboxes, combo boxes, and so on. One can also export a screen to PNG and JSON, and I will tell you why this matters in a few moments. And one can also automate a running SAP session, which is very useful for debugging and experimenting. This inspired me to propose a similar functionality for the browser library, and it was introduced in version 18. Speaking of browser library, Robosapiens also has a presenter mode, which I will show later. And of course, there are many other interesting keywords. You can read all about them in the documentation. So what is Robosapiens useful for? The first use case of Robosapiens consisted in automating the process of filling application forms for test purposes. Each application consists of a dozen forms, and there are dozens of parameter combinations. It's a tedious process and is error-prone. So Robosapiens has been of great help. The second use case involved comparing the screens and the data between two SAP servers which are supposed to be in sync. Robosapiens was basically used as a crawler that exported the forms, which were later compared, and the differences were documented graphically so that domain experts could easily know which forms are out of sync. The most recent use case arose a few weeks ago. A certain function was going to be deprecated, and the domain experts wanted to archive the data calculated with the function. This involved crawling and exporting over 5,000 applications, which Robosapiens accomplished in about 10 hours. I'm looking forward to learn about your use cases. Now I will demo some of the keywords. Along the way, I will give you some tips and tricks. Of course, it all starts with pip install. And as mentioned in the documentation, you have to make sure that the scripting support is enabled both on the SAP server and on the SAP client. Here it is shown how to enable it on the client. So like I said, Robosapiens has a presenter mode. You can activate it when importing the library. On the right side, you can see the SAP GUI client. The first thing I'm going to do is connect to this running instance. For that, I'm going to call the keyword connect to running SAP. So in the lower right corner, you see this barber pole indicating that the script is running, which means that we are now in control of the GUI. So now we can execute a transaction, let's say Migo. So now we get a screen full of elements that we can control. In particular, we recognize the field delivery node that I showed in the presentation. So let's fill this text field. For that, I'm going to call the keyword field text field with the name delivery node and the value 1 to 3. So the first time that Robosapiens sees a screen, it has to scan all the elements and build this in-memory database. So it takes a little bit, but the next time is much faster. All right. So now let's say that we want to read the value of a text field. For example, posting date. So for that, I'm going to call the keyword read text field with the name posting date, and we get a value. All right. So now let's say that we want to double-click a cell on a table. In this case, we have the cell 5 and some number, and we notice that it's in the column My Documents. So I'm going to call the keyword double-click cell, then the value of the cell 5 0 0 0 0 0 0 9 10, and then column title My Documents. So we did it, and we get a message in the status bar. So how do we read this message from the status bar? Well, for that, I'm going to call the keyword read status bar. And we get the return code from SAP, which is success, which corresponds to this green mark here, and also the message. So this can be useful when you want to make some road framework assertions in order to verify whether an action was successful or not. All right, so in this case, nothing happened. And we notice that actually all these entries are grayed out, which means that they are not actually active. So in order to activate them, we go to this menu and we have to select material documents. So how do we do that with Robosapiens? So we position the cursor on the menu in order to get the tooltip, and we are going to use it to select the value. So for that, I'm going to call the keyword select drop-down menu entry. And first, we need the name of the drop-down menu, in this case, is reference document. And then the value, which is material document. All right, so now we see that all the entries are active now. So now we're going to try to double-click the cell again. All right, so it worked. So as you can see, now this table contains an entry. So let's try to push this button, for example. So for that, I'm going to call the keyword push button cell. And here we can use the row number, which is 1, and the column title, which is line. So I'm going to say 1 line. All right, so we pushed the button and nothing happened, but it's all right. Okay, so we also notice that this row contains a checkbox in the column OK. And we realize that the checkbox is disabled. But anyway, we're going to try to select the value. So for that, I'm going to call the keyword tick checkbox cell. And as before, the row number first and then column title. OK. So we do that. And now Robosapiens tells us that this cell is disabled, which means that we cannot check the checkbox. All right, but now let's say that we want to double-click this text field. So for that, we're going to call the keyword double-click cell again. And now we enter first the content of the cell, which is hollow shaft, and then the column title, which is mat.short text. So now we are on the next screen, and we notice that there are a bunch of tabs. So let's say that we want to select the tab Sales Org 1. So for that, I'm going to call the keyword select tab, and then the name Sales, colon, Sales Org 1. So we selected a tab, but instead of staying in the same window, we got an unexpected pop-up window. So this is something that happens from time to time in SAP, and it's important to know how to deal with that. So in this case, we can use the keyword get window title. And that's how we know whether we stayed in the window where we were, or we obtained an unexpected pop-up window. So this is an important thing to know when we are dealing with unexpected windows. All right, so how do we get out of here? So we see that there is this button, which has a tooltip cancel, and then F12 in parentheses, which means that we can press the key F12 in order to close the window. So how do we press a key? Well, there's a keyword press key combination, and then we can just enter F12, and the window is gone. Perfect. All right. So now let's say we want to push the button additional data. So push button additional data. All right. So we get this table, and let's say that we want to read a value from this table. For example, this text here in Portuguese. So we notice that this cell is at the intersection of this row with this column. But we don't want to count the rows and say how, I don't know, this is a row number 10. We want to just use a text that we see here in order to identify the row. And we can do that. So now we can call the keyword read cell, and then the row is identified with the text PT, and the column is material description. And we get the text. Perfect. So let's say that we want to go back. So for that, we have to push this button. But we notice that this button has a tooltip that is back, and then some space, and then F3 in parentheses. So this is a tricky part, because there are several spaces, and that means that we will have to escape them in Robot Framework. So for that, I'm going to call the keyword push button, then back, and then there's one space. We have to escape the next space, and then F3 in parentheses. We are back. So this is something important to keep in mind. Some tooltips contain a bunch of spaces, and it's important to count them and escape them. Now, of course, this is very annoying, and we would like to just say push button back. And fortunately, Robosapiens allows us to do that. We can just say push button back, and Robosapiens will match the beginning of the tooltip and will push the button, which is very comfortable. All right. So now we go here to the bottom part of the window, and we see this small text field which has no label. So how are we going to enter some text in this text field? All right, so this is the next tip. If you press the key F1, you will get the performance assistant will give you some documentation on this text field. And on the top, we see this title, which is the name of the text field. And we can use this in order to enter some text. So this is, we're going to use this with a keyword field text field. So this is field text field, and then base unit of measure, and value PC. Perfect. So now we were able to fill out text fields for which we apparently didn't have any text selector, but we did. All right, so now we see this checkbox in the bottom. We would like to set it. So for that, I'm going to call the keyword tick checkbox, and then the label item OK. And it worked. Now we want to return the checkbox to its original state, and for that, we call the keyword untick checkbox. Perfect. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot. So for that, I call the keyword save screenshot, and then the path. So I will just say sap.png. All right, we saved the image, and now I want to show you the image. So I'm going to import the library process, and I'm going to start a process, which is start the sap.png. And since start is a Windows shell command, I set shell to true. Okay, so here's a screenshot. Now, you might think, well, this is trivial. We just made a screenshot of the window. But let me tell you something. In SAP, it is possible to embed a web browser, and it can be either Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge. And it happened to me last week that when we took a screenshot of a window, there was an embedded Microsoft Edge, but the screenshot showed an empty area. It was completely white, and I didn't have no idea what was happening. So I did some research, and eventually I learned that, well, there is a Windows API call that needs a parameter in order to do the full rendering. And eventually we got a screenshot with the contents of the screen. So yeah, sometimes you think that taking a screenshot is something easy, but sometimes it's not. So here's a summary of the tips and tricks I just showed you. Like I said, use iRobot. You can get it by installing Robot Framework Debug. As I showed, when necessary, you can press F1 to get a selector for a text field. And watch out for tooltips with 2 or more consecutive spaces. And of course, you will find more tips in the documentation. So I hope you got a good impression of the why, what, and how of Robosapiens. I will be happy to answer your questions in the live Q&A. Kiitos paljon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marduk. We have a bunch of questions coming in, so let's get you going. Let's go live. Hey, Marduk, welcome to RoboCon.
Hi, Joe. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you. Bunch of questions. So let's just start off with the first one, and it is from Anonymous. Wants to know, how did you do the translation? Is that something that can easily be done by other libs as well?
Well, actually, I was inspired by the OpenAPI specification, so I just defined format in JSON that basically specifies the name of the keyword, the name of all the arguments. And I also specified the possible error codes that's basically the exceptions that can be thrown by every keyword, which allows us to also localize the error messages. So I would think that in principle, this should be applicable to many other libraries. But of course, it depends on the kind of library. Like I said, SAP has localized the user interface, so it makes sense in that case. But for example, for REST APIs, I don't think it would make sense because usually they are all in English. But yes, I think it's the approach should be scalable, so to speak, to other libraries.
Nice. I think you're onto something. You mentioned this already. Anonymous says, loves the name. Any tips on coming up with creative names for our libraries? So,
yeah, I mean, I play a lot with the words. I think it helps to always try to find associations between words that sound similar. Or words that are related. Try to create, I don't know, like a short word. I once heard that's like the successful trick that many large companies use. Like a Spotify, Facebook, Twitter. It's always like 2 syllables at most. Yeah. And yeah, that works pretty well.
Great advice. How can you handle screens, forms where they have multiple text fields with the same label in different groups? This is one of the problems I ran into.
Well, there are different ways. I didn't show it in the presentation because it's more involved, but actually you can use not only the text that you see in the screen, but also the position of the components. So, for example, that I've already run into this situation that you have several text fields that have the same labels, but the position is unique. And that means that you can take actually your text field is at the intersection of 2 labels. So sometimes you have like a label to the left of text field. That's the standard situation, but sometimes it's also a label above. And then there's a syntax, which is in the documentation. For example, when you call field text field, you can say field text field and then the label to the left and then at, like an email. And then the other label above, and with that you uniquely identified the field. Another possibility when you're talking about groups is that in SAP there's this concept of boxes. So, for example, you could have like an application form where it says, I don't know, like one person and the other person, and both have a first name and a last name and an address and everything, but each person has like their own box, and the box has a title. So you can also use it this syntax that I just mentioned. You say like I don't know, first name at and box title, and then you can fill exactly this text field. So yeah, I hope that gave you some hints, and of course we can continue the conversation in Slack or the Robot Framework forum.
Absolutely. Exists a keyword like record selector from browser to get selector string when hovering with the mouse, or something similar to get selectors?
No. it would be technically possible because SAP API allows you to record the interaction with the GUI. But like I said, I mean, usually the string selectors, you can find them out yourself because just see the text on the screen, what's the label to the left of a text filter, or checkbox, a radio button, whatever, or the contents of a combo box, a drop-down menu. I mean, until now, it hasn't been necessary. But of course, if you find some situation where you say, okay, that would really save me a lot of time, then we could consider implementing that.
Cool. Can this automatically take screenshots when a keyword fails? What does Robosapiens not have this functionality, or why does Robosapiens not have this functionality as SAP GUI library?
Yeah, so in SAP GUI library, when you import the library, there's like a library switch that says, take a screenshot when keyword fails, yes or no, or true or false. And then you provide a path where the screenshot will be saved. But this is actually not so flexible because error handling in SAP can be quite complex. First, like I showed in the presentation, you might get some unexpected pop-up windows that contain some information from the server. I don't know, like something didn't work, the server is down for maintenance. Or you, I don't know, like some validation failed when you try to go to the next screen. And also, you will have to consider the text that you get in the status bar. So, like I showed, sometimes it says success, but the actual message is on. So you have to interpret that as negative. And of course, that message is localized. So that means that it could be in Finnish or Chinese or Russian or whatever, and we cannot take into account that. So my experience shows that the best thing to do is to define your own keywords for error handling, and there you can take a screenshot if you want and save the screenshots in the robot framework log. That's also possible to embed the screenshots like browser library, or store the message in the status bar in the log, in the robot framework log, using the corresponding log level, error warning, wherever. That also matches the error messages in the SAP status bar. So that's the reason I think that I think that it's important that users have enough flexibility to do error handling properly.
Great advice. This is compatible with any desktop application.
I mean, Robosapiens is explicitly designed for automating the SAP GUI desktop application. So that's not any desktop application. So I don't know if it was if someone interpreted it as being like a general purpose GUI automation library. It is not. It is only for the SAP GUI. I'm not an SAP expert, so I don't know if there are any other SAP desktop clients. But yeah, I would be interested to know if you can contact me. Yeah.
The original creator of SAP GUI library says, I approved your message and I urge everyone to use your library, even if it was just for the name.
So oh, thank you. You're so kind.
To you. Very nice. No object spy. How to identify control properties using text tooltips results in typo conflicts while performing actions.
Well, as I showed in the presentation, there is this amazing program by Stefan Schnell called the Scripting Tracker, which is actually the inspector or a spy, as you call it, which allows you to scan like the GUI and see behind the scenes how it actually works, all the properties of the elements. When you get a typo, you get a helpful hint from Robosapiens when you get the error message in the console. It says, "Hey, I couldn't find an element with the text that you entered. Maybe check the spelling. It could be the reason why." But yeah, I mean, yes, there are situations in which the selectors are not unique. But like I said, there's always you can either click F1 to get this a small window with a different selector, or use more information like the intersection of two selectors, or sometimes you might have like two text fields which have the same label, but one is like to the right of the other. So you can use the label of the first and then the content of that text field. And then just like in browser library, you can write an arrow with two greater than signs, and then that points to the next text field. So we have some strategies for dealing with duplicates.
How fast would all these commands run together? Do they run fast when not executed with PowerShell? I assume PS has some extra network overhead or similar?
Well, I can tell you that when using Robosapiens in a company network, it runs really fast. So what you saw here was a bit slow because on the one hand, I was using the presenter mode, which introduces a half-second delay for each keyword call. And on the other hand, my SAP client is thousands of kilometers away from the SAP server. So that also introduces some delay because you have to wait for the response of the server. But in my experience, I always execute a robot framework in PowerShell, and it runs in the intranet of the company. And it runs really fast. Like in a few seconds, you go through a whole sequence of clicking and selecting and filling text fields in over 15 screens. So that shouldn't be a problem. But of course, it would be interesting to know about your use case. I haven't tried everything possible, and there's always things to improve. So I would be looking forward to hear from you.
All right, let's try to do a 1-minute lightning round and clear the board. Is there a Python API for SAP? Or are you using another language, C#?
Yes, I am using C# because SAP offers the scripting API, which is actually COM interface, and there's a possibility to generate a .NET binding, and I find that more comfortable. So I would say the Python API for AP could be de facto Robosapiens.
Nice.
Browser automation, yes, you can do that with a browser library. Sorry.
Is it headless mode available? Do you support it?
Somebody asked me that a couple of years ago, and I know that it is possible to execute SAP in a web browser, so maybe going that route. And I know there's also the Java GUI for macOS and Linux, so maybe you can also do that with a VNC server. I mean, even the Windows GUI could run with a VNC server, maybe. I haven't tried that.
Have you compared it against vendor tools like WinShuttle or other market products?
No, I've only tried to use a robot framework, of course.
And final last question. You're going to be on the dark side or light side for people that want to hit you up for more info?
Dark side, of course.
Awesome. All right. Thank you again, Marduk, for contributing to RoboCon Online. Really appreciate it. Really good session. Got a lot of feedback. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Awesome. See you next time. Cheers.
See you.
Awesome stuff. All right. So I'm going to give you an hour so you can really enjoy GatherTown. Check out the sponsors. Shout out to all our sponsors. Check them out in GatherTown. As you can see here in the little image, you see little boots. Check out those boots. Also check out our videos because they have if you still haven't figured out the puzzle, it's one of your last chances to do so. All right, I'm going to give you an hour break. We'll be back.